I didn't know how to get in either, so I wasn't able to help anybody. I apologize for everyone. Just for continuity's sake, I'm not going to work on the chat right now. So maybe we can just save questions for a break or for...
But yeah, just do one thing that Tara asked in, that's hit record.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that chat. Sorry.
Did I not do that? It's recording, isn't it? Do you see the button recording? Yes? Okay. I'm going to bring up my screen again. Okay. So Ayurveda Kamar Tantra. As I was explaining to Eva, this is not my area of specialties either, so I'm a student along with you all. It was something that we definitely touched on during my training as an Ayurvedic practitioner. However, it is a specialty, just like when anybody's training for, you know, any type of practice, there are different branches and specialties you can go into. Kamar is the branch of Ayurveda that is related to the discipline of and the support of mother and baby from preconception all the way to childhood. So it's very vast, you can imagine, and this is a short training. So we're just basically going to touch on some things that I thought in my perusing all of the ancient texts would be most helpful for you all as yoga teachers, possibly already mothers, possibly hoping to become mothers someday, or knowing mothers, right? We all know mothers. So I'd like to just preface this again. Eva's already heard this, that this is in no way my opinion on how everything should be handled. This is a very ancient practice and belief system rooted in spirituality and divinity. So it definitely doesn't all come into play, or may not all even be possible in this modern day. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I can say that I did not do any of these things that I'm actually going to be talking with you about. And the beauty of it is that I can go back and I can see how it might have helped me too. After my daughter was born, I actually did have a very severe vata imbalance that led to a lot of, and I'm not a vata, but we'll get into that, but that led to a lot of health issues, which propelled me to study more holistic belief systems, including Ayurveda. So it's actually a beautiful class to be teaching, because I think, maybe part of the reason that I even got into studying Ayurveda was because of my daughter and the health issues that I had after having her. So, however, this is a very vast discipline and practice, and we, like I said, are just going to touch on some of the things that I thought might be most beneficial to y'all as yoga teachers and professionals and women and humans on the planet. So in dealing with Ayurveda Kamar, which is really translated as nourishing and supporting youth. Kamar is the youth, Kartikya, the son of Shiva. And Tantra is this discipline, this weave and wrap of practices, rituals that we do as part of our sadhana. Britya is the nourishment and support and the carrying of a fetus in the womb. So this whole branch is called Kama Britya Tantra. It begins with preconception, goes through conception all the way to childhood. So in the ancient texts and in the further studies of Ayurveda, Kama Britya, they are also concerned with, the child into youth age. We're not going to go that far. We'll just do preconception and conception. So Suprajan is actions taken to allow for the highest potential between a man and a woman for their progeny, for their reproduction. So Suprajana is concerned very much with preconception, with the time before there is even the joining of man and woman, an egg and sperm. And in the ancient texts, they list out a regimen for both the man and the woman when they have decided, the couple has decided to have a child. They list out an entire regimen of panchakarma therapies. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with panchakarma or not. But panchakarma is basically a therapy that is designed to move the doshas if they have come out of place, to move them back into their places within the body, and also remove any disease or ama that may be residing in the body. So the goal for panchakarma for mother and father to be is to have them be in the healthiest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual place they can possibly be prior to conception. So things like, could everybody mute themselves, please? I'm going to mute everyone. So some things that are recommended for the mother and father to be are oleation and sudation, which is oiling of the body and sweat therapies. These help move any doshas that may be out of their sites, because of course the doshas have specific sites within the body. And when they move out of those sites, we can experience symptoms of imbalance within the body. So the oiling of the body and the sweat therapies of the body are meant to loosen up the doshas if they've been lodged in any muscle tissue or bone tissue or any other sites in the body, any of the 7 dhatus of the body. We move them back from those external areas back to the center, which is where kapha, pitta, and vata reside normally in a healthy state. Then we administer vamana and varechana, which are they're the actual two of the actual panchakarma therapies, which are induced vomiting and also purgation through the colon. So these again are just meant to cleanse the body of any residual ama or imbalances within the body. After that, a rasayana therapy is recommended. So a diet of sweet food for the man to help strengthen their sperm, and then also a diet of sesame oil for the woman to make sure that her egg is very healthy. And just a quick, for those of you that aren't familiar with Ayurveda, and I don't know how many there are that may not already know this, but according to Ayurveda, there are 7 tissues in the body called dhatus. And when we eat a diet that's proper for our constitutions, for the season that we're in, and we have a strong Agni, which is our digestive fire, then we create something we call ahara rasa, which is basically microchyle. And that microchyle, sorry, that microchyle goes to feed these 7 tissues that Ayurveda recognizes that each human being has. And the 7th tissue is the reproductive fluids. So that would be the man's sperm and a woman's egg, as well as the fluids that are surrounding and helping to lubricate that whole reproductive area. So goal is to have the healthiest sperm and egg possible through healthy lifestyle and then these panchakarma techniques. So that's the ancient belief system surrounding why we would do panchakarma and then do rasayana therapy prior to even conception, so that both the man and the woman are in a very balanced, very sattvic, very healthy state. And of course, when we're dealing with the physical body and we're cleansing and purifying the physical body, we're also cleansing and purifying, the kosha system. So since all are connected, there's a belief from an Ayurvedic perspective that the cleansing of the body is also a cleansing of the mind. It's also a cleansing of the emotions, and a cleansing or a rebalancing, refocusing on the spiritual and the divine within. It gets really specific in these ancient texts in the Charak Samhita about what a woman should be doing for 3 days from the onset of her menstruation, observing celibacy, sleeping on the ground, taking food from an unbroken vessel kept in her hands, and never cleaning her body. And then on the 4th day, she should use unction, which is oil, take a head bath, wear white apparel. Her husband should do the same things, both of them wearing white apparel and garlands. With happiness of mind and having attraction for each other, should then at that point enter into cohabitation, which is the point in which conception begins. Leading up to this, there are a lot of mantras that are recited by priests. The couple would go to the temples and go to the priests, and mantras from the Rig Veda and other Vedic rituals would be performed. Some of them are included, just lightly, some of the mantras are included in the Charak Samhita, but a lot of them you would have to go to either a priest or look in the Rig Veda yourself to look up. But one of them is, may God release you, may God maintain you, be equipped with Brahmavarchas, Brahma, Brahaspati, Vishnu, Soma, Surya, Ashvins, Bhaga. So it's basically calling on all of these deities to allow for healthy progeny. So again, this is not necessarily something that any of us need to adopt. And it isn't even necessarily religious. It's more the way I was looking at it when I was reading these texts was just really respecting the reverence that this ancient practice was, the reverence for the bringing in of a new life. So whatever, if you know somebody who's thinking of having a baby, or if you haven't or are going to have more or whatever, just, really pondering and meditating on, where you really need to be in a physically, mentally, and spiritually positive place to allow for that soul, which is really coming in, right, to pay off some karmic debt, maybe with you, maybe with other people, but you're this vessel, you're this, this support system for this soul to come in and play in this world for a while, in this Maya for a while. And so really taking to heart and doing whatever practices of yoga or spirituality or religion that are in your, in your practice and in your belief system, to kind of center you and put you in the healthiest place you can be. There were purification rituals performed on the mother to be, and then according to Charak Samhit, the fetus is comprised of the mother and father's Panchamahabhutas, which are the 5 great elements of ether, air, fire, water, and earth. It is comprised of the mother's ahara, which is her diet, her food, what she takes in. And of course, in Ayurveda, we believe that diet all has qualities, elements, and is also part of the gunas. So, if she's eating sattvic diet, if she's eating rajasic diet, if she's eating tamasic diet, this diet is also going to play a part in what the fetus is comprised of. In Ayurveda and yoga, we believe that past life karma plays a lot into what the fetus or this new life, this soul that is reincarnating, will be comprised of. And then there's this idea in Charak of wholesomeness or satmya. So it's really the wholesomeness of life, right? So what type of life are you living? And of course, we're all practicing yoga, studying to be yoga teachers, really investigating further this whole idea of living life very intentionally. So wholesomeness can look different for a lot of people, but in general, it means, what your thoughts are, what your beliefs are, what your daily life and relationships are. And that wholesomeness goes into also comprising the fetus. And then of course our mind, which is composed of the trigunas, sattva, raja, and tamas. And this is the mind of the incoming soul. That's what they're referring to in Charak Samhit, not the mind of the parents, although that is the mind of the mother is definitely related to the fetus once conception actually happens. But the mind of the soul that's reincarnating, because of course when we leave the physical body and transition out of Leah personality into possibly another incarnation, what do I take with me? I don't take my body, I don't take any of my material things, but I do take whatever consciousness surrounds me, right? So this mind is what propels us from life to life to life, which is of course why it's so important in yoga and Ayurveda to really delve into and understand the machinations of the mind and endeavor, as they say as it is said in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, to quiet the chitta vritti, right? To not be propelled from life to life to life, or even from action to action to action in this lifetime by the chitta vritti. So those are the 6 components according to Charak Samhit that the fetus is comprised of. And then it is said in the Charak Samhit that the child resembles those things which the mother thinks in her mind during conception. So that's a very interesting thought. And of course, it would be different for every woman, I'm sure, what she'll be thinking about during conception, but it is a beautiful idea. So in Ayurveda, we would believe that to prepare and then to remain in sattva during preconception and then also while pregnant is the best overall practice for a woman. So that would include ahara, which is diet, vihar, which is basically living a healthy lifestyle, which would include your dinucharya, which is your daily routine, achar, which is your behavior, and vichar, which is your thoughts. And then, of course, we would include in yoga and Ayurveda, we would include a practice of asana, pranayama, meditation, and possibly mantra. So these are the things that would really help a woman have the healthiest physical, mental, and emotional, spiritual body during preconception and conception, and then even after. So recommendations for a sattvic diet. In general, almonds, things like almonds, walnuts, dates, figs, sesame seeds, fresh fruits, saffron, cardamom, ghee, milk, butter, fresh coconut, split moong dal, whole grains, and root vegetables are considered the most sattvic diet from an Ayurvedic perspective. And sattvic means that these are not going to agitate the mind. They are full of prana. They are sweet in taste, so they are pleasing. Each food from an Ayurvedic perspective falls within 6 different tastes, the Shad Rasas. So sweet foods are considered the most sattvic. And of course, Ayurveda is recommending naturally sweet foods, not necessarily processed sweet foods. But these include all of the foods I just recommended. For Vata doshas, we would recommend more warm, cooked, mildly spiced foods that are moist, sweet in rasa, things like oats, rice, wheat, cinnamon, ginger, basil, aduki beans, split moong dal. Most nuts are okay if you have a strong enough digestive system, or you can prepare them by roasting them with a little cumin and black pepper and salt. Sesame oil is a beautiful oil both externally and internally for Vata dosha. Although I wouldn't recommend cooking with sesame oil if you're going to be cooking something very hot. It doesn't have a very high heat point. But you could use olive oil and ghee as well for cooking. I like ghee for all of the doshas because it's very sattvic. It is also, even for kapha dosha, who we generally say doesn't need as much fat or oils, it enkindles the digestive fire, the agni. So if you use a little bit of ghee in your cooking, even as a kapha, that's my highest recommendation. For pitta dosha women, we would recommend cooler foods. And that doesn't mean uncooked or raw. It just means that you would add things like coconut or cilantro, which are more cooling in nature to your foods. Sweet taste is very good. Bitter taste is very good for pitta, which is also going to be cooler foods. Things like barley, quinoa, rice, coriander, mint, fennel. Most legumes are okay for pitta dosha. Sunflower and pumpkin seeds are the best for pitta dosha. Moderate amounts of ghee, coconut oil, sunflower oil, and olive oil are the best oils for pitta dosha. And coconut oil and sunflower oil can be used externally on pitta dosha as well as internally. For kapha dosha, we recommend again warm, because the thing that kaphas and vatas have in common is they both have a more cold nature than pitta dosha. So anytime you're dealing with kapha or vata, you want to warm the system up. You want to heat it up a lot for kapha and just warm it nicely and gently for vata. So we would use spicier foods for kapha dosha, drier foods. So where vata needs moist, kapha needs drier foods. And this is because kapha is more water, earth element, and vata is, of course, the air and ether elements. So we're balancing these doshas by giving them the opposite elements than what they naturally are, right? So this is basic Ayurvedic foundation. We're balancing with opposites. It's Brahmana and Langana, right? So we're building, toning, or we're removing and scraping away. And Kapha needs more, more removal. Vata needs more building. And Pitta is somewhere in between, depending upon, their state of health. So anyway, warm, spicy, dry foods, favoring the astringent and bitter flavors of food, and pungent. So those are the three tastes that most balance Kapha dosha. Any fruits and vegetables that fall within those. So for instance, apples and pomegranates are considered astringent. Dark leafy greens are considered bitter. I don't know any pungent fruits, but things, oh, that's not true, because actually black pepper is a fruit. So black pepper is a fruit. Millet, barley, buckwheat, ginger, peppers, oregano, legumes, things like popcorn, chia seeds, small amounts of sunflower oil, ghee, and olive oil. And again, I would lean heavily, no matter whether you're Vata, Pitta, Kapha, I would lean more heavily on the ghee during preconception and during pregnancy. Ghee is very balancing. And it does not hinder Agni. Just using a little bit lighter amount for Kapha and Pitta, and you can be more liberal with a Vata dosha. So to practice a more sattvic diet, a Hara's diet, we would eat according to the seasons, according to our Agni, and according to our doshas. So I just gave some recommendations of foods that would be really sattvic and good for each of the doshas, but we have to also remember what the seasons are. If we're pregnant during winter, if we're pregnant during summer, if we're pregnant during, fall or spring, then we have to, from an Ayurvedic perspective, look and see what is available, what's fresh, what's local, what grows in this season. And those are the foods that are going to most balance us, right? It is a challenge in this day and age to find locally grown foods. We're lucky here in Austin. I don't know where everybody on this call is from, but in Austin we do have farmers markets and food shares and such. But I'll be honest with you, I buy apples year round, even though it's not Ayurvedic, because I love apples. So even though they're not in season really anytime in Texas or anywhere in Texas, I buy them year round. But for the most part, we should endeavor to find out what grows in our area and during what seasons, and really try and go for those, especially if you are going to be very disciplined and strict about it, especially surrounding the time of pregnancy, because that's the time when we need the most prana, right? We need the most energy because we're going to be eating for two. We're trying to keep our tissues healthy so that we have enough minerals and nutrients within our body to then feed to, the baby, the embryo that we're creating. So prana rich foods are the foods that are grown locally, that have not been picked or shipped from other countries, or ripened within a vault. Those kinds of things, while I can't say for sure remove prana completely, they definitely deplete prana from the food that those practices are done for. During meals, we sit quietly. We're not doing other things. There's no excessive activities, which is sometimes hard in this modern day. We're often trying to do more than one thing at a time. But if you can, during food, to sit quietly with your loved ones or by yourself, turn off the phone, turn off the TV. If you have to converse, maybe just nice, quiet, pleasant things, not a lot of gregarious conversation during meal times. And this is so that you can enjoy the food and your Agni can be at its highest potential. Because if you think about the stages of digestion, we're starting with preparing the food, thinking about what we want. It starts in the mind. Then we're preparing, all of these smells are being released. And all of these are signaling enzymes in the stomach, Kledaka kapha and Pachakapitta within the stomach, to release what we need to be able to digest our food properly. So then when we're eating and we're actually taking bites or using our hands, whatever it is that's within our practice, to eat the food and tasting it and chewing it. If we're talking, we're not spending as much time chewing, right? So Ayurvedically, we recommend at least 30 times, chewing 30 times per bite, taking a sip of water with each bite. That seems a lot for somebody who may not have that in their practice. And I admit I'm naturally like a very fast eater. So sitting and eating 30 times really turns me into, it's more of a meditation at that point, right? And your food gets so broken down within the mouth that you feel the digestive process already beginning, right? So, and then the masters in my lineage say, if you chew your food 100 times, you can eat almost anything you want or as much as you want, because it's so properly digested within the mouth. And of course, the recommendation isn't to eat as much as you want or whatever you want, but that's the saying, because 100 times you've really broken that food down into almost that microchyle that we're talking about, the ahara rasa, that goes directly into feeding the tissues. And then, of course, we recommend saying a prayer, some prayer of gratitude, right? Whatever is your belief system, whether it's a prayer just to the apple in front of you, thank you, apple, for nourishing me for the way you taste. Thank you, Mother Earth, for growing these beautiful, plants and fruits for my body to receive the nourishment that I need. The prayer can be whatever calls to you, but that prayer really, again, allows for proper digestion and receival of this nourishment and this ahara that we're receiving, that is going to create this body as well as the body within inside of us. So chewing thoroughly, not taking too much or too little liquid. So the Ayurvedic recommendation is to just take a sip of warm water with each bite. Hang on just a moment, please. Okay, I have some people waiting to get into the meeting. Sorry. Okay. I had some people waiting to get into the meeting. So again, a warm glass of water or tea, cumin, coriander, fennel tea, ginger tea, even mint tea if it's summertime, but something warm that you're just taking a sip of with each bite. And we're not drinking a whole guzzle of water before food. We're not drinking a whole guzzle of water after food, because that can impair the digestive fire, which we call Agni. So we like to say that if you drink a large amount of liquid, give it about an hour or two between meals. Otherwise, just taking small sips of about a cup of tea with your meal is very helpful and adequate. Not to overeat, not to eat if emotionally agitated. And I like to remind people that emotional agitation doesn't have to be a negative emotion. It may be a very positive emotion. If we're very excited about something, overly joyed about something, we're still in a state of high vata or high agitation. whether it's a negative or positive emotion, and that's not a time to eat. That's a time when Agni is not as at its strongest. So best to wait, do some pranayama. You can do some Shitali pranayama or alternate nostril pranayama. Just relax, bring yourself back to center, and eat when you're in a more balanced emotional state. Also not to eat if you're not hungry. So that's something that I think is a really beautiful practice, to really sit and think for a moment, okay, it's lunchtime, it's dinner time, it's breakfast time, whatever, but am I really hungry? And if you're not hungry, then that's something to think about. Maybe it's that Agni is low and you need to look deeper into that and take some ginger tea or a little bit of ginger, lime, and salt to kind of enkindle that digestive fire. Or maybe it's just that you simply do not need any food right now. Maybe the day is a heavier, hotter, more humid day, which is not conducive to eating a lot of food. But however the reason, if you're not hungry, it's best not to eat no matter what. And then the recommendation is to leave at least 2 hours between the intake of food. So here is the monthly, hang on just a second. This is the monthly regimen of diet for a woman who is in a state of pregnancy. I'm not sure if I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm gonna go back to that slide here in a minute. To just touch on Agni for a moment, for those of you who may be new to Ayurveda, Agni is our digestive fire. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, we believe that it is this fire that resides in Jathar Agni, which is the digestive system that burns or transforms food from whatever it is that we're taking into digestible matter to feed the tissues. And of course, depending upon your prakriti, whatever your dosha is, or your current state, your vikriti, your Agni may be in different states. So we say that usually Pitta dosha has a higher Agni because of that fire element, that a Pitta dosha is already has a higher fire element within them. And we usually say that Vata dosha and Kapha dosha may have more impaired, colder Agni. Vata dosha we call Visham Agni, so it's very variable, which is similar to the qualities of air and ether, where sometimes you're hungry, sometimes you're not hungry, sometimes you can digest your food, sometimes you can't digest your food. So for a Vata dosha, really watching your current state each moment before you take in food is very imperative to eating, so that you can have your highest optimum Agni. And then Kapha doshas usually have just a slower Mandagni, which is a slower metabolism, slower breakdown of food. So we may even recommend for them like longer periods in between meals, smaller meals. And then again, the warm, spicier foods to help enkindle that Agni. We have to take into account the season. Currently in Texas, we are in summer. We've just transitioned from spring into summer. And according to ancient texts, summer is the time when Agni is at its lowest, which seems maybe counterintuitive to a lot of people, because summer is a very hot time and Agni is fire and Pitta dosha. So you would think, or one might think, that during summer our Agni would be the highest, but that's actually the opposite. It's actually the lowest, because that fire from Jathar Agni actually disperses into the tissues during summer season and is weakened as a result of that. So we experience temperature heat within the body, but our Agni is actually lower. So during summer season, we have to really be very careful of not eating foods that are too heavy, that are not easy to digest. We want to be very careful with that. I'm going to pause for just a moment. And recording again. Does anybody have any questions? This might be a good time to. I just punched into the chat the book that I recommend. Oops. And I'm admitting some more people. Okay. So, taking into account season in relation to Agni, summer is when Agni is at its lowest, and on the other side of that, winter is when Agni is at its strongest. So that's a whole different class lecture, excuse me, on Ritucharya, which is basically the regimen, the routines surrounding season. However, it is just important to note when you're dealing with, you know, a goal of being pregnant or dealing with pregnant women, what the season is and how that might affect their Agni. Also, the environment that we're in, and environment means not only actual physical location, whether we're in Texas or Colorado or England or somewhere else, but it's also the type of work and home environment that somebody's in. Is it a sattvic situation? Is it more rajasic or tamasic? And so when you're, working with women in a state of pregnancy, understanding what their environment is may be very beneficial for you in recommending certain type of asanas or daily routine recommendations. I like to recommend people using a food journal, because this helps people who may not be aware of their state of Agni. It helps people kind of come into more awareness of that. So like a food journal would be what you've eaten and how you feel after you've eaten it, including how you digested it, your emotional state, how you eliminated your energy fluctuations as a result of that food. And then that just helps you go back and say, oh, whenever I've eaten certain foods, this has happened, and have a greater awareness surrounding your decisions, and also how those decisions in food might be affecting you. Khichdi is always just a beautiful food for anyone in any state. So anytime you're having digestive issues, if you're pregnant, if you're not feeling great, if the doshas are out of balance, or if you're even experiencing something more serious, khichdi is a beautiful recommendation and food from an Ayurvedic perspective, because it's a very wholesome food. It's very sattvic in nature. It gives you all of your mineral and nutrient requirements. It's easily digested. And what it allows Agni, your digestive fire, to do is it allows your Agni to strengthen while you're still receiving nourishment, right? Because it's so easily digested that your Agni doesn't have to work really hard, and your Agni may be able to rebuild itself, repair itself. Agni meaning the digestive tract. Also, we have to remember that our digestive enzymes, when they're not busy digesting food, can go throughout the body and digest any other buildup within the body of ama, or excess proteins, or metabolic waste within the body. So as often as we can, giving Agni a break is really an overall healthy thing to do. And again, you know, when you're pregnant, that's a time when Agni may be more impaired than normally, because just because of all of the things that are going on within your body at that time. I'm going to take another quick break. I'm sorry, my dog is, I think he got into something and he's having kind of a hard, he needs to keep going outside to go to the bathroom. Hang on just a minute. I'm going to bring up my screen. Thank you guys all for being so patient. So, a dinucharya, a daily routine to bring sattva into our life. So, anybody who has studied Ayurveda or listened to any of my classes, or I'm sure any of Michelle's lectures or anything on Ayurveda, will know that, you know, what I'm basically going through here now is the same thing I would recommend to somebody who isn't pregnant too, right? So it's not a huge difference. I'll get into some specifics for pregnancy here in a minute. But the goal, as I was talking about in the beginning of the class, is to make sure that prior to conception and during conception, the woman is in the greatest state of health she can possibly be in. So these diet recommendations, strengthening Agni, and then this daily routine that I'm talking about are really with the hope and the goal of making sure that the woman is in the highest state of health that she can possibly be in for herself, for her own balance, but also for the life that she is getting ready to create or is in the state of carrying. So just a very general dinucharya for anyone, but very good for people who are preconception or in a state of pregnancy, would be to wake with the sun. And the reason I say that is because really with time changes and being all over the world, setting a certain time is kind of, it doesn't really work. So as long as you're waking with the sun or a little bit before the sun, that allows for your energy, your internal clock to be in alignment and harmony with the external environment wherever it is that you live. So we recommend waking with the sun. We recommend prayers immediately upon waking. So that can just be looking at your hands, prayers of gratitude, maybe your mantra, maybe just zoning in on your breath for a moment before you jump up and you know, run into the day. Whatever it is that kind of brings you to a place of center inside, that gives you balance and peace and a state of sattva. I'll let him in really quickly. So then after you've gotten up, we recommend drinking a warm glass of water. It can be with or without lemon. This helps to enkindle Agni and release whatever the body has been busy detoxing overnight. So when we go to bed, we have to remember that the body is very much at work, even when we're in a state of dream or non-dreaming state of sleep. The body is working. The body is cleansing the lymphatic system, cleansing the glymphatic system, cleansing the digestive tract, doing all sorts of work. The liver is working. And so these organs of detoxification that have worked all night, when we drink a warm glass of water first thing in the morning, that helps to eliminate whatever toxins they have worked so tirelessly to cleanse the body of. That helps us actually go ahead and eliminate them out of the body. So then after the water, we sit on the toilet to evacuate. Even if that's not our normal time, it's a good practice to get into, just sitting on the toilet. And if urine will probably come. If feces doesn't come, you can sit on the toilet. You can put your elbow, you can take your right hand and put your right elbow on your right knee and your chin on your hand, and you can begin to do Ujjayi pranayama. And you can try that for about 15 minutes. And usually that will help for a complete elimination to occur. Then we go through the process of cleansing the senses through the actions of, obviously brushing, flossing our teeth, oil pulling, which is taking oil. Usually sesame oil is recommended in the mouth, about a tablespoonful, and swishing it around, spitting it out in the trash afterwards. We're not swallowing it. We would tongue scrape, which is they sell tongue scrapers, but I just use a silver spoon and just taking the spoon and from the back of the mouth, from the back of the tongue to the front, just scraping 3 to 4 times, rinsing off, scraping 3 to 4 times. And you can do that about 7 times. We recommend Netra Basti, which is eye cleaning. So you can get an eye wash, or you can just splash some cool water. If you have an eye wash, you can use rose water or a Triphala eye wash to cleanse the eyes every morning. And then we recommend doing a neti wash for the nose, which you can buy neti pots at most health food stores. And then I think they also have little syringe like things that you can do as well. But we recommend cleansing the eyes and the nasal passage, and then using nasya, which is an oil that usually has brahmi or vacha or a combination of herbs within it, to inhale into the nostrils, putting about 3 to 5 drops in each nostril with your head tilted back, inhaling and then rubbing, and then spitting out whatever comes into the mouth. So the goal of these actions is to cleanse the senses, right? So that we're ready to get on with our day with our senses clean and balanced, because whatever we take in through the senses, whether it's in our mouth, through our eyes, through our ears, through our skin, whatever it is, that's how we're receiving and perceiving the day. So we want to make sure that those are cleansed and balanced. We would practice abhyanga and or dry brushing. So abhyanga is the daily oil massage with whatever oil is prescribed for your dosha, or you can do a dry brush. Dry brushes are usually just those body brushes that you buy at the natural food stores, and you can just brush the skin with it. So this stimulates the neuropeptides on the skin to be able to release hormones within the body that are very balancing, like serotonin and dopamine, the things that keep you healthy, balanced, feeling good, and able to receive whatever is going to happen in the day with grace. Then we would bathe. We can use essential oils, and at the end of this lecture, I have some recommended essential oils for pregnancy, but you can just use essential oils that are balancing for you. If you like lavender or sandalwood, rose, patchouli, any oils that you find are very balancing. There are some that are specific to the doshas, but in general, just scents that are natural, that aren't perfumey, that are just kind of going to go up into the nasal passage, that stimulates our Mejadatu, which is the nervous system, to be more relaxed or be calmer, or be, if we need more stimulation, if we're feeling more tamasic for the day, we can use things like frankincense and myrrh to be more stimulating for us. Then we recommend going into your sadhana, your yoga sadhana. So you would do your asana, your pranayama, and meditate from there. after these things, that's when we recommend you would sit down for breakfast and observe the practices we recommended for diet in the previous slide. Then you would go into your day and you do your work or your seva. You would have lunch at noon. This is time to eat your largest meal. You can take a walk after your meal. Dinner is recommended at 6 or before sunset, depending upon the time of day and where you are. After you've eaten, we recommend just a gentle review of the day. This might be the time when you look over your food journal, or when you look over a gratitude journal if you keep one. It might be a time when you sit back and think about the things during the day that worked or didn't work without judgment, but just to be able to process that before you go to bed, so that you're not in that state of processing during sleep. Because oftentimes we have dreams that are really based on the activities of the day, because our mind didn't have that time, that very focused, allotted time to review the day, meditate through it, do our pranayama, release whatever we need to release, and then go to bed with a fresh, clean mind. And then, of course, before bed, we also recommend any type of yoga practice that is within your practice, yoga nidra or chandra namaskar, maybe just some stretches. You can again do pranayama, meditate before bed, and then going to sleep by 10. So, does anybody have any questions? Because these next slides we're getting into are specific to when you've conceived and what happens from an Ayurvedic perspective. But does anybody have any questions about a more sattvic dinucharya or a hara or anything that we've talked about so far?
Leah, this is Eva. Sorry.
Yes, hello, Eva.
I just quick, and maybe you're covering this somewhere, but I'm really curious about the specific pranayama that's recommended for pregnancy. So maybe you're going to get into that later, but you've touched on pranayama just a little. I wanted to throw it out there.
Okay. Yeah, so there isn't a specific pranayama for pregnancy. Obviously, alternate nostril breathing is a beautiful pranayama because it keeps you in a state of sattva and balance. But there are specific pranayamas depending upon, like for instance, in the first trimester, which I am going to get into, a lot of women experience nausea. So Shitali pranayama is recommended for nausea during the first trimester. Ujjayi pranayama is a really good one for maybe women who don't have a very strong pranayama practice. If you're working with a woman who's maybe new to yoga or pranayama, I would recommend just Ujjayi pranayama and maybe Soham meditation, so that they're just getting in the practice of really being able to focus and recognize the breath and be with the breath. But there isn't a specific one like for pregnancy in general. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I wondered if like there were ones that might be like counterindicated. Actually, that's more what I'm worried about, is like not giving them something that's too vigorous or stimulating to the uterus, or what, that would be more of my concern, I think, is giving them something that could be harmful.
I wouldn't recommend doing Kapalabhati, Bhastrika, pranayama at all during pregnancy, because those are very agitating to, the abdomen and the reproductive organs. Kapalabhati is like specifically for the reproductive organs. So I would definitely not recommend that at all. I would recommend only gentle pranayama exercises. So even Nadi Shodhana, we just want a gentle alternate nostril breathing for somebody. We don't want somebody trying to like actually cleanse out any, specific deep rooted emotional imbalances with their pranayama during pregnancy. This is something they should do before or after pregnancy for sure. But yeah, no, I would not recommend Bastrika, Kapalabhati. All the rest of them, though, Shitali is very balancing. A gentle alternate nostril, Ujjayi, Brahmari would be a very beautiful practice for pregnant women who are maybe feeling, there's a stage in pregnancy where women might start to feel a little bit energetically low and depressed, and I'll go into that according to Ayurveda. So you could recommend Brahmari at that time, because that helps them kind of go inside and open up that heart chakra and feel the divine love and receive that divine nectar from within inside of them, right? That doesn't come from anywhere else. So if there are any states of low emotions or depression, Brahmari pranayama I would recommend. Utgit is beautiful, and of course Soham throughout pregnancy would be a really, I think, very balancing. Okay, so it's hard for me to see everybody that is waiting to join. For some reason it's not like very obvious to me when people are waiting to join. So I apologize for people who have been waiting in the waiting room if I've missed anybody, or left anybody hanging out there for a very long time. I really apologize for that. For some reason, it just doesn't seem very obvious to me. And then so every now and again, I'm just checking participants, but I'm probably not doing it as often as I should. So I apologize for that. I will try and do better. So this, to me, was like my favorite part of, I was telling Eva, I don't know how many of you heard it, but I was telling Eva that I don't have, this is Ayurvedic prenatal is not my specialty. So this is a whole branch of Ayurveda that we are really literally just touching on here. But and it's not my specialty, but I really enjoyed, so I'm a student through this process as well, and I've really enjoyed delving into it. And this slide in particular to me was my favorite, and I hope you guys are really get into this too, because it's very yogic. But so according to the Aitreya Upanishad, which I went and looked up, and I don't have a copy of it that I recommend to anybody. Of course, all of these Upanishads and Vedas and Charak Samhita and all of these ancient texts, there's so many different translations of them, right? And so so sometimes we may read them as lay people and not be able to understand them the same way certain more divine beings may be able to understand them, or depending upon the translation of them, we may not be able to glean the deeper meanings in some of them, and some of them may be more obvious. However, Aitreya Upanishad was not one that was on my radar, but I recently was in a training with one of my Ayurvedic teachers, and he was talking about the migration of the Kundalini in utero. And so from an Ayurvedic perspective, Matru and Pitru, which are the egg and the sperm, the woman's ovum and the man's sperm, when they come together, at that moment that they meet, that one of the sperm, which is, like just a little locomotive train just swimming through all of this stuff trying to get to that egg, and that egg's just, in all her glory, waiting to be received by whoever is strong enough to make it. When that sperm actually reaches that egg, we say from an Ayurvedic standpoint, which may not be, the belief system of other cultures or the West or whatever, but we say it's at that meeting that the soul actually enters. right? So at that union, Matru and Pitru, that is when consciousness, the soul, the mind, everything enters that conjoined, male female energy, Shiva, Shakti, Purusha, Prakriti, yin yang, all of these things are all the same. In that union, that's when soul enters. And from that union, that's when Kundalini, which is, that energetic, Kundalini can be described in so many different ways, but it's really this snake coil at the Muladhara, that they say in the Aitreya Upanishad that it's actually enters through when sperm and ovum meet, and that it's actually waiting at the Vidriti, which is this the fontanelle. The Vidriti is the fontanelle, right? It's that cleft of the fontanelle that we all still have, but is obviously still open when a baby's first born. And that Vidriti is the Lord's abode. That's the abode of Chit, which is the awareness in Sat Chit Anand, right? Truth, awareness, and bliss. And that awareness enters the body at this Vidriti when Matru and Pitru join together. And this is where Purush and Prakrit are still joined, right? They're still in union. Shiva and Shakti energy are still in union. And that awareness is pulsating and throbbing at the Talu, which is the Sahasrara chakra. So we have this pulsating awareness that has entered into a woman's physical body and is aware at this point, right? With it comes all of the karma of past life, all of the trigunas, all of the things that we have carried with us that propel us as these magnets, these soul magnets that we have called into to propel us into another physical form to play out whatever karma it is we're supposed to play out. And then, of course, that pulsating, throbbing energy is full of prana, right? That Icha Shakti, which is the willpower of prana, draws that energy, separates that Prakriti energy out and draws it down slowly, slowly, slowly as this fetus is forming from the Sahasrara, from this Vidriti, the fontanelle, all the way back down to the Muladhara, which is, done month by month. And I was looking, when I learned of this, I was looking in the Ayurvedic text to see if it coincides. And it kind of does, right? Because we have 7 chakras. And of course, a baby is full term at 9 months. But if you think about in the very beginning, that first month kind of being that time when crown chakra is being generated, and then the second chakra is generated, that intuition of Ajna chakra during the second month. Then the third month, we're down in the throat, and that's when we start having heartbeats and stuff like that. So it kind of started to, it wasn't quite in line with the actual development of the fetus, but it was close, and I thought it was kind of really beautiful to investigate further. But in the Aitreya Upanishad, they're saying that during this time the baby is in complete bliss, right? But it's in a tamasic bliss. So it's a very passive, choiceless time. Whatever the baby's receiving during this time in utero is not of its own choice. It's coming through the tanmatras of the mother, right? So it's just living in, it's receiving its nutrition, it's receiving energy, it's receiving whatever is coming through the mother's tanmatras, which are the sense perceptions of the mother. So again, going back to why we want mom and dad to be so healthy prior to conception, and we want mom to remain in such health during pregnancy is because this is what the baby's receiving. The baby can't receive anything on its own. It's all coming from the mother. So we have to be careful what kind of, interactions we're having, what kind of work we're doing, what kind of pleasure we're enjoying. It's fine to watch movies, but if they're movies that are very moving, that make you very sad or very scared or very angry, then maybe those are things that we need to, whether it's a movie or a work or a relationship, those may be things that during pregnancy we may want to kind of veer away from, because they're not only affecting our physical well-being, they're affecting the physical well-being of the life inside of you. So then it's said in the Maitreya Upanishad that when Kundalini reaches the Muladhara, which again, if you'll remember, is the base of the spine, then Apana Vayu, which is one of the Vayus of prana, is activated, and that's what stimulates the mother to begin having contractions in the uterus and the cervical lining to dilate and everything to begin happening. Apanavayu governs, pregnancy or childbirth. And so it is actually stimulated once Kundalini has reached Muladhara. So physical birth begins with the separation from the source, right? So this baby who has been in utero, in bliss, in a very tamasic state. So we can look at tamas, people like to say tamas is bad, but tamas is also a state of anabolism, where we're building tissue. It's a state of, holding, waiting, and preparing. And so then Apanavayu is activated, birth happens, and this baby is pushed out from its source of bliss, right? It's pushed out. And that divinity that it was, that it remembered, that it came from, the source that it was living within, the awareness becomes individuality. And that first cry comes, and that physical birth is when, we can say from a yogic or, Buddhist or whatever, that sorrow of separation and suffering is actually, that's when we're the first experience of it. And this is when jiva, the self-identified soul, comes into play, right? So before we were in that state of union, in that state of chit awareness, which is, not individual, not related to ego or to identity. It is the state of awareness that we all have within inside of us, that when we're born and pushed out of that bliss becomes the self-identified soul, which is identified as Leah or Eva or Cassidy or whomever else is on this call, and that is the beginning of our separation from that. And then, of course, goal of yoga is to return or remember what our truth is. So according to Charak Samhit, the embryo development is related to the earth element, which makes sense, right? Because we're building. And that's predominant. During the first trimester, they say in the Charak Samhita that the embryo is both manifest and latent. We do see a heart beating by the 4th week. It's during this 4th month, or this 1st month, excuse me, that we would want the mother to develop a more intuitive practice for herself and for this pregnancy, to maybe during this time set a bhavana, set an intention. What would you like for this next 9 months to be like? So if she isn't already journaling about dreams, food, gratitude, or her daily life, this may be a time to begin that practice. At the 2nd month, and by the end of the 7th week, all of the essentials are actually formed within the baby. it's just kind of a jelly, this zygote, but all of the essentials are actually formed at this time. Sorry, I'm just looking in the book here to see if there's anything. These are regimens for the first month. I'll get that here in just a moment. Okay. So in the Charak Samhit, we're talking about the manifestations during the first month. When accompanied with all the attributes, the soul takes the form of an embryo. So the attributes are what we talked about in the previous slide, the elements of the mother and father, the diet of the mother, the mind, the soul, and the wholesomeness, as well as the trigunas with the mind. So during the first month of gestation, it takes the form of jelly, which we call the zygote, because of the intimate mixture of the 5 mahabhutas, those 5 great elements, which develop in subsequent months as the tissue elements of the body, the dhatus. During this month, the embryo bears no particular form, and the organs of the embryo are both manifested and latent. During the second month of gestation, the embryo takes a compact form in the shape of a knot, elongated muscle, or tumor. The knot-shaped embryo leads to the production, they're saying in the Charak Samhita, of a male fetus, and the muscle-shaped to a female fetus, and the tumor-shaped to something different. During the third month, all the senses and limbs, along with their organs, manifest themselves simultaneously. So this is when we begin to see the actual microcosm of the universe within this fetus. It's said in Charak Samhit that the individual is a microcosm of the universe. All the material and spiritual phenomena of the universe are present within this individual fetus. Similarly, all those present in the individual are also contained within the universe. This is how the wise desire to perceive. So the senses and organs of the fetus are simultaneously manifested, except those that are manifested after birth. This is when Anahata Chakra is really, for both the mother and the fetus, this is the time of Dwa Ridra, which is the two-hearted. This is when the mind of the fetus pulsates with certain desires connected to the mother's heart. So the fulfillment of these desires of the mother at this time are fulfilling the desires of the fetus. So Dwa Ridra actually means two-hearted or bicardiac state, and it's talked about in Charak Samhit as the heart of the fetus, which is derived from the maternal source, is connected with the mother's heart through the channels carrying the nutrient material. These channels connecting the fetus and the mother carry the desires of the one to the other. It is with this end in view that people do not want to ignore the desires of the fetus as reflected through the wishes of the pregnant mother. If such desires are ignored, the fetus may either, it says stuff in here that I don't really want to say, but we don't want to ignore the desires of the fetus and the mother during this time. The proper maintenance and protection of the pregnant mother is as good as the maintenance or protection of the fetus itself. So the wise attends upon a pregnant mother with special care to fulfill her favorite and useful needs. So it's really during this time that women may start to have certain cravings or and it may not just be food. It may be for a type of life or activity or relationship or study that they never really were into before. And the beauty of that, if we think about it, is that those desires really may be coming from the mind and the heart of the fetus living within inside of them. So we obviously want to be very careful. And it actually states in the Charak Samhita that if the desires are, dangerous or unwholesome or unhealthy, that we should really try not to do that. But it actually says in Charak Samhita that even if the desires are really not the best, that the mother may be able to get away with them during this time because they are coming from the fetus. So obviously everybody take that, as they want to, and try and fulfill desires in the most healthy, balanced way they possibly can. But hopefully this makes sense to y'all. I thought it was really beautiful. So a suppression of these desires could vitiate vata dosha within the fetus. So, the doshas are already present within the fetus at this time, or the elements that will create the doshas are already within the fetus at this time. So vata dosha may get vitiated. And when vata dosha gets vitiated in utero, obviously we can see some physical manifestations of that. So, so if you think about the description of people who are higher in vata dosha, sometimes they have certain physical manifestations within their bodies that are different than other people because of that vitiation of air and ether when creating tissue. So I thought this was really interesting because a suppression of desires of the mother and the fetus could actually vitiate vata dosha. So I wonder, how many things, how many defects I gave my daughter for not doing the things I wanted to do while I was pregnant. Although I did everything I wanted to do while I was pregnant. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, it's just something to think about according to ancient Ayurvedic texts. And then, like we were talking about, Eva, during this time we can practice Shitali, Pranayam, Ujjayi, mantra pushpam, which is just, mantra, right? So if you want to do the Bij mantras, if you have a mantra that you've been given by your spiritual guide, or if you have a certain Ishta Devata that you are close to, you may at this time really want to spend some time doing mantra practice. So the embryo development during the second trimester. Okay. During the fourth month of gestation, the fetus gets stabilized. Therefore, at that time, pregnant women specifically get excessive heaviness in the body. So you might start to actually feel at the fourth month, first trimester, usually sometimes it's even hard to recognize somebody's pregnant, but maybe beginning at the fourth month, a woman might actually start to feel that physical presence of a fetus within her body and feel a little bit heavier during this time. So a lot of self-care, again, we've already talked about the desires, but self-nurturing during this time. If there's any activities, relationships, or things that are not conducive to your overall health and well-being at this time, this may be a really great time to just punch the pregnant card and say, I'm pregnant. I don't feel like doing that right now. And just allowing that to be your practice for the rest of this process. During the fifth month, In comparison to other months, there is an excessive increase of flesh and blood of the fetus during the 5th month of gestation. Therefore, at this time, the pregnant woman grows excessively thinner. So we might actually see the pregnant mother losing weight during this time because of the growth of the fetus. Oh, and in the 4th month, I did write down a couple of meditations. Tratakam meditation, that's the ghee lamp gazing, is very good for self-nurturing. It's very sattvic, very balancing to all of the chakras. So there's a specific meditation where we light our ghee lamp, right? We sit before it and we're practicing Soham pranayam while we're gazing with our eyes open without blinking at this ghee lamp. We gaze as long as we can with the eyes open without blinking until tears come. So maybe 5 minutes or so. And then we close the eyes. And this beautiful meditation, you'll see the negative image of that ghee flame right at your 3rd eye when you close your eyes. And you'll hold it there at your 3rd eye. And then you'll bring it down to your throat chakra, to Vishuddha. And you'll hold it there for about 2 minutes, breathing Soham, and bring it down to Anahata from there. Hold for 2 minutes, bring it down to Manipur, hold for 2 minutes, bring it to Svadhisthana, hold 2 minutes, bring it to Muladhara, hold for 2 minutes, and then bring it all the way up to Sahasrara. Hold for 2 minutes. And that's a very cleansing, purifying, balancing, sattvic meditation that will be very fulfilling and self-nurturing for a mother to do at this time. During the 5th month, we just went over that, the mother grows thinner. So this is a time, Mahadharma isn't really a meditation practice, but it's really just very thought-provoking, right? At this time, our dharma, if we're the ones who are pregnant carrying this fetus, this is our great dharma, Mahadharma, to be the mother of this soul, right? To be the caretaker, the vessel for this soul that is coming to play out whatever karma they're coming to play out in this life, right? Their own actions in the past, their own mind, their own soul has created their path, and we are but a vessel to play with this during this current manifestation. So really just meditating on the reverence of the process that is happening within the body and through, this joined spirit with yours. During the 6th month, in comparison with the other months, there is an excessive increase in the strength and complexion of the fetus during the 6th month. Therefore, at that time, the pregnant woman loses her strength and complexion considerably. So like the 5th month, as the fetus is growing and gaining in physical tissue and strength, then the mother may be losing some of that during that time. And that's a very important time to remain in your dinucharya with your ahara, watching your agni and doing all of the things that keep you in a place of balance and peace and bliss. Nadi Shodhana visualizations, Asatoma, which is a really beautiful mantra. I don't know if you all know Asatoma. Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Myrtamna Mamritam Gamaya. Lead us from falsehood to truth. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. And then the embryo development during the 3rd trimester. So the 7th month, there's an all-around development of the fetus during the 7th month of gestation. Therefore, a pregnant woman becomes exceedingly deficient in all aspects of her health. So again, just like 5th, 6th, 7th, we're just continuing with that possible depletion of a mother's physical and maybe mental and emotional strength at this time as well. When the body feels tired and weaker, then sometimes we can experience weaker emotional feelings as well. So it's a time to do a lot of Anahata chakra supporting, whether it's postures in asana or chakra meditations, mantras to support Anahata chakra, gratitude journaling, Brahmari pranayam, like I was talking about with Eva. This would be a really good time to do Brahmari pranayam because Brahmari is specifically for Anahata chakra. It's really for balancing from Anahata all the way up to Sahasrara. So it opens up that divine love within inside of us. So during this time, we can do Brahmari pranayam. The way I was taught to do it, covering the eyes with the middle and ring and pinky, bringing the index fingers to meet at the 3rd eye, and then plugging the ears with that flap in front of the ears with your thumbs, and then inhaling through the nose, exhaling with a hum. So they call it the humming bee breath because you can hear that buzzing, humming inside. And I've seen other people just practice it just simply by sitting with their eyes closed, inhaling, and then humming the exhale, inhaling through the nose, and humming the exhale. So if that's an easier way to describe to clients to do it, that's fine too. But that humming really stimulates the heart chakra, the throat chakra. And also, if you practice it, you'll recognize it's stimulating to both Ajna and Sahasrara as well. So it's really bringing into alignment all the emotions and that maybe possibly individual love that you're feeling, transforming it, purifying it through the throat chakra and turning it into a more divine, more wholesome awareness at Ajna and Sahasrara, right? So during the 8th month, this is a very important time, and this is what most of my studies concerning embryo and pregnancy were related to when I studied Ayurveda, is about ojas. So ojas is this super fine essence that we believe is derived from 2 sources. The first source called para ojas, which is pure, perfect ojas, great ojas, is 8 bindus are received at conception in the heart of the fetus. 8 bindus, which are 8 little drops. And this is karmic. Like how much ojas you have is karmic, right? So these 8 bindu that you receive in your heart are what you're kind of given to go into the world. And then we believe during the 8th month, the ojas of the mother, which is this, ojas can be compared to the immune system, to the strength, to the bala of a woman, to the ability of a woman to fight off not only disease, bacteria, viral, but also emotional strength too, right? So that strength within a woman that ojas that she derives from the food that she eats after it goes and creates all and nourishes all 7 tissue systems, then that last final bit goes to create more ojas within the body. So digestion is of the utmost importance, because it's through that perfect digestion that we're creating perfect tissue systems and also then more ojas. So apara ojas, which is not the superfine ojas that is received at conception in the heart of the baby, but apara ojas, which is this ojas that is created by the mother, begins to move back and forth between the mother and baby during the 8th month. So they say in Charak Samhit that during the 8th month of gestation, ojas formed in the body moves to the body of the mother and vice versa through the channels carrying nourishment from the mother to the fetus because of the immaturity of the fetus. Therefore, at that time, the pregnant woman often has a wavering feeling of joy and sorrow. So there may be a lot of fluctuating emotions during this time as the mother's ojas and the baby's ojas is moving back and forth. Okay. So from the 9th month on, according to Charak, this is considered a healthy time for the birth of the baby. I'm going to go on some of these other slides and talk about things that we can do to build healthy ojas within a mother, foods and herbs here in a minute. But things like ojas elixir, chaiwanaprash, which is an herbal jam, and then of course the practices of sattvic diet and daily routine are really important during this time, because they're what are helping the mother to create and share ojas with the baby.
Leah, can I ask a question?
Oh yes, yes.
No, because you said you wanted to wait for the break.
Why don't we take a break? We've finished the 9th month. Let's take a break and ask questions.
Okay.
This was good.
So my question was around, because you're saying, the 9th month was the healthy time for the birth. What's Ayurveda take on, on premature birth? What's happening for the baby? Or what could be the consequences, for example, if you have missed some of these milestone, I would say, in the development?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think that Ayurveda's take would be that much different than Western medicine, in that when a baby is born prematurely, there can be issues with immunity and underdevelopment of certain tissues and organs. So Ayurveda also believes that as well. And we do believe that during the 8th month, if a baby were to be born, according to the Ayurvedic text, it says very clearly that at this time, because of the unsteadiness of ojas, that it is not a desirable time to have a baby. Now, thanks to modern medicine, we're able to take premature babies and keep them and give them what they need that maybe they weren't able to receive through a full term time in a full term pregnancy. But there are obviously going to be some issues with development of both tissue and immunity that thankfully, again, they didn't have back in ancient times, but with modern medicine, there's a lot of help that can be given through modern medicine. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So, we're all just doing the best we can, and we have to recognize that, there's karma at play, and the goal is obviously for everyone always to have, a full-term pregnancy and a healthy pregnancy, but we do have to yeah, we do have to take into consideration that it isn't, it's not always in our hands for that to happen, right?
Leah, I have a question.
Okay.
So, the first trimester, if I remember, just trying to clarify, in the third month,
Mm-hmm.
where you spoke about the two-hearted mind
Yes.
of the mom and baby. So at this point, do you know if there is that desire that the baby has? Is it strictly from the mom, or could it also be from any karmic um, memories that the baby is bringing in?
Yes. According to Charak Samhit, the bicardiac state is talked about this way. As soon as senses are manifested within the embryo, which is during this, when did we say this? What month was this?
The third month?
Yeah, the third month. So they're saying as soon as the senses are manifested within the embryo, its mind, the embryo's mind, gets associated with feelings. And from that time onward, there is pulsation in the embryo and the desire for whatever was experienced in the previous life of the individual. This condition, according to the wise, is known as Dao Ridra, which is the bicardiac two-hearted state. So their belief is that this desire that maybe the mother is having is not actually necessarily coming from the mother's mind, but it is actually coming from the desires of the fetus that it is carrying with the mind from previous life.
Okay. That is so mind-blowing.
It is kind of mind-blowing, no? Yeah. I mean, you know,
Wow.
there's, and everybody is going to have their own personal beliefs in regards to this, but one of the masters in my lineage, who's very famous, you all might have heard of him, Yogananda, Paramahamsa
Yes.
Yogananda, talks about remembering all of his past lives in his mother's uterus, right? So this was a very divine being who retained that memory throughout his life and was able to be born in a very highly elevated state. But you know, we all have that. That's what I loved about this other slide about the Kundalini, is that in the beginning of when that sperm meets ovum, in the very beginning, all that there is just that union, that awareness. And that awareness has awareness of past life, has awareness of this life, has awareness of everything all happening at once. There's no linear time, there's no identification or separation. And so, you know, according to these ancient texts, these Upanishads, each soul has that in utero. And then of course, goal is to remember and return to that state even while in physical form. And that's the goal of yoga and Ayurveda as well.
Okay. So this just, I mean, not to get too much off what we're speaking about, but this can literally translate into the reason why children and their own personalities and how they develop under the same roof and the same parents and the same this can actually be a starting point, right, to understand.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, they even say, so the really interesting thing, I don't know, I apologize again, the beginning of this class was so fraught with difficulty. I don't know who was here or who heard what or what I said, but I know at one point in time I was telling Eva that because this wasn't my specialty, I really enjoyed looking through Charak Samhit and reading these chapters on it. And in the Charak Samhit, when they're talking about what the fetus is manifested from, right, which is the Pancha Mahabhutas of the mother and the father, the soul, the Satmiya, the mind, Sattva, Raja, Tamogun, as well as the diet of the mother, all of those things coming into play, there's actually a discussion in this ancient text about how, well, no, because if it had to do anything with the mother, then, anybody could be a mother and they would have whatever kind of child they want. If it had to do just with the soul, then a soul would choose any family it wanted to, instead of, there was all this discussion about it. And going back to your point, it was saying that that's why in some families, certain children have proclivities towards this, where certain children have proclivities towards that. Even in some families, siblings can look very different than the other. So personality and all of that stuff is a combination of so many things, but chiefly the mind that is being carried, transmigrating with the soul from an Ayurvedic and yogic perspective, from life to life to life to life. It's being carried. So, so you're carrying with you certain desires and personality traits according to these ancient texts.
Well, thank you for
Leah?
clarifying this. This is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
I don't know. I lost sound for some reason,
Okay.
so I missed the master that you said you were starting to talk about, a master in your lineage.
Oh yes. Yeah. Paramahamsa Yogananda.
Okay.
Paramahamsa Yogananda.
And then my other question was, could you give an example of how, like, from one lifetime to another, that karma would carry over? Does that make sense? Like, I know it does, but I'm kind of unclear of, like, I think I need an example to really have it set in my mind. So, like, if someone was this in a past life or had this issue, kind of what would happen when they go into their next. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like I understand your question, and I want to just preface all of this by saying that, that these are, that I'm not an expert in any of this, that these are just understandings that I've been taught through my teachers of Ayurveda and yoga as well. But my understanding is that the soul, which is this pure chit, this awareness, right? It is without attribute. It is without personality. It is without desire. It is without, any of the gunas. It is without sattva, raja, tama, all of this stuff. It is just this pure awareness, right? And my understanding is that the consciousness that surrounds the soul, which this soul, like the way I like to think of it, is like this magnet, this like nuclear magnet that is so powerful, like we can't even really fathom the energy that this teeny bindu, which is the soul, which is like microscopic, but the energy surrounding it is like nuclear, right? It's so magnetic. And as it was shaken from Purush, which is the cosmic soul, through Purusha's desire of Prakrit, of creation, the Shiva and Shakti, which separates, and then these vibrations of separation that get denser and denser and denser and closer together, begin to form cosmic intelligence, and then ego, and then mind, and all of the gunas of the mind, and then they vibrate even more together and they begin to form the elements and all this stuff. So this is like creation, right? And it's creation on a macro scale, on a universal scale, but also on an individual scale. So when sperm and ovum come together, this is Purusha and Prakrit, this is Shiva and Shakti. However, my understanding is that as we live in this Maya, this creation that is created as a result of this split between Purusha and Prakrit, and we are experiencing this Maya, this illusory world around us through our senses, right? Through our eyes and our ears and our nose and our hands, and we're retaining memory, right? So there's all the stages of the mind, right? There's the memory, the intellect, the ego, and then the mind is a separate thing as well, right? And those are all also related to the elements. The mind is related to the air quality. Ego is related to earth quality. Intellect or buddhi is related to fire quality. Emotions are related to the water element. So all of these things are happening. And as we go through life, experiencing through the senses, remembering those experiences, those rememberings begin to, if you will, I won't say cloud our thoughts, but they begin to direct our thoughts towards certain things, and they create the personality that we have, right? So our experience, we remember that experience, and eventually that experience is the habits that we do in daily life, right? So when we leave our body and we're no longer a gross physical manifestation anymore, we still have the covering of all those subtle mind qualities that we're talking about, of sattva, raja, tamas, of manas, which is the mind, of buddhi, which is the intellect, of ahankar, which is ego, and then of the heart too, which is the emotional body, right? Which is more ether, that space that carries everything. So those coverings are still attracted to and attached to that magnet, that nuclear magnet that the soul is. And so when the body passes, because of course body is ephemeral, right? Body is not lasting. So body passes, and of course these other things too. Consciousness is also ephemeral. The only thing that is not ephemeral is this chit, this awareness, this sat chit anand. However, these subtle qualities of the elements that cover the soul, that are the kosha system, right? The pancha koshas, those will transmigrate with the soul, and they may be the propellant for the soul to take birth in a specific place, time, family, whatever, right? Does that make sense? So, there's some schools of thought. One of the yogacharyas in my lineage said, we don't choose our birth. And I kind of understood what he meant, even though I feel like it's like tomato and tomato. I feel we do choose our birth, right? Because of our actions and because of our beliefs that go into creating the chitta vritti, the memories, the buddhi, the ahankar that we live with, and the personality, the practices that we have. That becomes the choice of the soul to re-embody and continue that rebirth. However, his point was more that unless we're in a state of awareness, unless we're in a state of very, very highly elevated state, we can't necessarily decide, I want to be here, I want to be there. Those actions are more like propellants, right? Like they're karmic, like it's a karmic propellant of the soul from life to life to life, until we, through the practice of yoga and Ayurveda, or whatever our spiritual practices are, until we live with such a state of awareness that we either are able to, within a lifetime, merge into that unity, merge into that chit, and no longer become, a slave to our karma, a slave to the senses. So maybe we don't take rebirth, or maybe we become so merged in that unity and chit that we can decide to be reborn as, a higher elevated spiritual master like Yogananda, or some of the other elevated spiritual, spiritual masters that have lived and are living during this time. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. So I'm looking at the chat. If those practices Mm. Okay. So yeah, at the beginning of my class, I don't know, Adrian just asked a question. A lot of my PowerPoint, and this is, I think I, in the beginning of this class said that, you know, these are not, I wasn't able to follow any of these practices when I was pregnant. I didn't know any of them. I had no, these were not on my radar when I was pregnant with my daughter. And so we do the best we can. I think the goal of Ayurveda, and I hope that I've portrayed that the desire from an Ayurvedic perspective, whether or not we can do the exact practices that are laid out in the ancient texts or not, the goal of Ayurveda is to be as healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally as we can, given our current circumstances, environment, relationship, karmic life, etc. And then also taking into account that whatever occurs for ourselves as either the embryo that was created or in making a choice to be mothers someday, that a lot of stuff is just karmic, right? And that's part of, so karma for me is not a bad thing at all. Karma for me is a beautiful rebalancing of the universe. For every action, there is an alternate reaction, right? And it's not bad or good. It's not evil or, you know, or any of those things. It's not revenge. It's not unfair. Again, to quote the same master in my lineage, Yogananda, for me, it was like one of the most eye-opening things I had ever read in my life. He said that there is absolutely nothing that happens in our life that we did not create somehow. So we are not victims of our mothers, our fathers, our environment, our culture, anything. We are actually karmically inclined through, you know, many, according to yoga, millions of lifetimes, you know, towards certain things to balance whatever we need to balance, right? So I don't know, there's somebody asking me some questions privately on chat. I don't know if you want them to be shared with me speaking or not, but there are a lot of people who were born into circumstances that are seemingly out of our control. Okay, Adrienne was talking about how her mother smoked when she was pregnant with her. And so there may be some obviously physical manifestations as a result of that. Trauma created within the baby. And, you know, Ayurveda looks at trauma a very specific way as well. Physical trauma, like actual physical manifestations of trauma, we would treat through the use of herbs, diet, panchakarma. Even for the baby, you can oil the baby. You can give babies massages with oil, rub their heads very softly, massage their whole bodies with oil to help kind of ease any trauma that may have been experienced either in utero or after birth. And then, of course, the techniques of yoga, the practice of yoga and Ayurveda are all about bringing balance to a system that is out of balance, because it is truly the human condition to be out of balance, right? The doshas, the elements within us are always out of balance. They're always moving around and changing and fluctuating as a result of relationships or diet or environment, seasons. All sorts of things are constantly making those elemental qualities within us, you know, be out of a state of balance. So goal of both Ayurveda and yoga is to bring all of that into balance so that we can go inside and return to that chit, to that awareness that is within inside all of us. So post-pregnancy yogic prescriptions for babies and moms that may have received trauma would very much depend upon the trauma, would very much depend upon, you know, whatever the physical or psychological manifestations those are. I don't know if that helps at all. Arnica is a good, yes. Okay, arnica is a good remedy for trauma to the baby in utero. It may be helpful to the mom as well. You know, I'm a believer in homeopathy. Oh, and you've got some arnica right there. Yeah, I'm a believer in homeopathy. I've used arnica for traumatic injuries, you know, and so yeah, all of the practices that I was talking about, the pranayama, the diet, and the daily practices are what we would recommend to kind of bring, you know, mother and baby back into, and there are specific herbs, but again, those are kind of like Ayurveda really doesn't believe one size fits all. So I would really need to kind of understand the symptoms and the specific manifestations to recommend an Ayurvedic prescription. Yeah. So, okay. Does anybody have any other questions? We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to leave the rest of the slides for tomorrow. But does anybody have any other questions or comments that they'd like to? I don't know if I got to everybody's chat, so if there was a question on the chat that didn't get answered or that somebody would like to ask, why don't we go ahead and do that now?
Is today's training only till 12?
I
It's
thought
not
it
till
was,
3.
yeah.
It's only till 12.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
If we had a client that was plant-based or perhaps allergic to ghee, would you have any recommendations instead of that?
Right. Yes. According to their dosha, I would recommend, you know, more sesame or olive oil for vata, sunflower for pitta, and kapha, or maybe olive oil for kapha. Yeah. Yeah. Eva, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, with all of this stuff, though, we need to be mindful when we're giving recommendations to other people that we are not Ayurvedic practitioners.
Yeah.
Right? We cannot give nutritional advice, right? We can say, this is what I did, this is what I heard, you may want to look this up, or here is an Ayurvedic practitioner. But you know, we have various levels in this course, and maybe not everyone has received that message that you can't do that.
Right.
As a yoga teacher, and we need to be Michelle constantly telling us, stay in your lane, your lane. Yeah. And it's good to know what's out there, because I had no idea about any of this stuff. Right.
Yeah.
But as we're telling everybody, you know, do ghee, do it, that's great for us personally, but then we can't make those recommendations for others professionally.
Right.
Yeah. We need to be aware of our scope of practice. So just, you know, because there are 200s here and 300s here and YT people here, we just need to be clear about what we can do professionally and where we need to stay in about, we need to honor the boundaries. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Right. Yeah. So, right. So my understanding is right. Exactly what Eva said, that as yoga teachers, you're not allowed to diagnose. You're not allowed to, you know, tell somebody you're a pitta, kapha, or a vata, or, you know, give them treatment protocols that include food or herbs. However, you can maybe recommend to a client that they take a dosha test and give them some literature regarding what foods are considered to be sattvic and good for vata, pitta, or kapha. I would stay away from recommending herbs only because certain people have more, more reactive systems. So in my belief system, herbs are benign if they're holistic Ayurvedic herbs, but somebody may still experience a reaction to them that is uncomfortable or different that you may not want to be, responsible for. Does that make sense, right? So if somebody takes triphala, which I consider to be an herb that I would recommend to anybody, a digestive herb for anybody, if somebody takes triphala and they have a highly toxic system or a very reactive digestive system and they have diarrhea the first time they take it and they come back to you and say, well, I took the herb you recommended and I'm now having diarrhea or I'm constipated or I felt nauseous, that may not be a game you want to be involved in. Right? So yes, what Eva's saying is very important. And that's a little tricky with me because, what to teach you guys Ayurvedically that you can actually share with people. Maybe some of these, just some of the knowledge, I guess, maybe just informing them that there is a practice that believes, that what you eat can be more sattvic, that what you do daily. I think the daily routine, my understanding from Michelle, is allowed to be prescribed by yogic teachers. So recommending they wake at a certain time, eat at certain times, chew thoroughly, have their yoga, sadhana, and practices can be recommended by yoga teachers. And then, I would, if I were you and you really had somebody who seemed very interested in it, just guide them towards some literature about maybe taking a dosha test. And again, I would be very careful, like doing the dosha test with your clients. It would be something that I would recommend you guys give it to them, let them take it, let them decide what they think they are. Because dosha tests, I don't like dosha tests. I mean, I guess we're recording, so I'm on the record for saying that. I don't like dosha tests. I've never had anybody do a dosha test where they actually even A, understood the questions, or B, were, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but were self-aware enough to understand how to answer them, right? So dosha tests are tricky. So if you want to recommend people do a dosha test and you find one online that you really like, that's fine. But I would let them make their own decisions of what they think they are. I wouldn't weigh in, if I were you, on what you think they are or help them go through it, because then that kind of gets, I guess, a little bit into the, you diagnosing them as a dosha. And we have to remember also that the dosha that you see may be their vikriti, maybe their current state, and not actually their prakriti, which is the dosha that they're actually born with. So, yeah, Ayurveda is for you guys, this class I think is maybe just more informational personally for you guys. And if there's some daily practices or some things that you feel, that can be shared that are not diagnostic or prescription related, then I hope that you can walk away with some of those. But yeah, that is a lot of Ayurveda, and that is, I guess, if you get right down to it, I've always felt that Ayurveda was a yoga. I've always felt that Ayurveda is the practice of yoga, but there are some very specific things that we study in Ayurveda that, takes a long time. I mean, I'm still a student of Ayurveda, but I went to school for 2 years to receive my Ayurveda practitioner, and then I have to do continuing education every year, many hours of continuing education. So it's not something that is necessarily just a throwaway. Oh, you're a pitta, go do that. It is definitely a tantra, a disciplined practice that requires a lot of study and a very thorough understanding to prescribe and diagnose people with. And I'm still always a student and learning myself. So anyway, I hope that helps. And I hope that there is some stuff in this presentation that you feel you would be able to share and use with people.
Yes, I think, that there is. And I think it's really beautiful to be able to see how all of that overlaps, right, with yoga. I just want to caution everyone
No,
to
thank
be
you.
aware of when you need to refer out and where you need to be mindful of what is your lane, staying in your lane. So
Yes.
we don't get ourselves into difficulty, but also we're not making recommendations that we don't have the credentials to give. That we need to send those on. But knowing all this stuff helps me to know when to send somebody to you or someone like you, right? That helps. It's very helpful. Anyway, that's great. Thank you.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Eva. And I had a question in the chat from Catherine. There is a National Ayurvedic Medical Association. So it's Ayurveda / let me type it in here. Ayurveda Nama. I'm going to put it in the chat because Catherine was asking if there's a listing of trusted accredited Ayurvedic practitioners worldwide. I don't know if they're worldwide, but I think this would be a good starting point. Ayurveda Nama. I'm trying to type it in here. Nama.org. They are my governing body, and the schools that I study with, their governing body here in the United States. It's the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, and I know they have a list of accredited schools as well as accredited practitioners, counselors, doctors, etc. of Ayurveda. So that's a good site to start with. I'm not sure if there's another one for Australia and Switzerland, but here in the United States, NAMA is the one that I would recommend. I know that there's like another governing or accreditation group somewhere. NAMA is centrally or is located, out of California. And of course, Ayurveda is an emerging practice where not every state has laws governing it. So NAMA is trying to be kind of that governing body over all of Ayurvedic schools and practitioners, no matter what state you're in, so that there's some standards set forth for the schools and for people who are calling themselves practitioners or doctors or counselors of Ayurveda. They're putting forth the standards and the the tests and all of that here in the United States. I think there may be another one in on the East Coast, but I don't know that one. So NAMA was started by, I think, it's been around for about 20 years. And a lot of really beautiful Ayurveda Acharyas were the founding members of it. Yeah, it's a really good organization. I've been really pleased with that organization. And that's how I found my school, was going to their website. Oh, okay. Well, we are at noon, and my schedule said 9 to noon today and tomorrow. So I guess we'll stop unless anybody has any other questions. No? Okay. I'm going to just say a closing chant. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, but I just, I like to begin and end with a little chant. Om